This podcast is sponsored by Soren's Ford of Brookfield. The home of the nice guys is about to get a whole lot nicer. To see it for yourself, follow Soren's Remodel on Facebook, and better yet, visit in person. Soren's Ford, located at 189th and Capitol in Brookfield.
I'm just a traveler on this earth. Shove my heart behind the pocket of my shirt.
It is 6:42 on News Talk 1130 WISN. Still ahead, the state Senate finally passing the GAB and election reform packages, and Ben Carson spending the weekend blasting the media for overhyped stories and fake scandals of 50 years ago. You remember what you were doing 50 years ago? You have the details exactly right in your head? Not only that, but it turns out that he does have the details right on these stories, and the media is looking ridiculous. Good listener, you probably know that Wisconsin has a law stating that all motorists must have insurance. This is a state law that was passed in 2009. It mandates that drivers, at the very least, have liability insurance in case they hit someone. And yet 12% of Wisconsinites do not have that. 12%. And when those people are involved in accidents, it is the rest of us who see our insurance go up as costs borne by the insurance companies are spread out to the rest of us. And so West Dallas Assemblyman Joe Sanfelippo has a bill in committee, AB 92, which would deal with the scoff laws, and he joins me now to talk about it. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Jay. I'm doing very good, thanks.
Good to have you on the show again. First of all, why the need to go after the 12%? We're never going to have total compliance on such laws, will we?
No, and this isn't a silver bullet that's going to get us down to zero. But the National Association of Insurance Commissioners has done a study, and along with Florida State University, and what they have shown is that the states who have stiffer penalties and who enforce them vigorously have a much better rate of compliance. And we've got states around the country that are as low as 5 or 6%. And so I think it's important for us to try to chip away at this 12% unemployment number we have, because the insurance industry tells us that for every percentage point we can lower our uninsured drivers, we're going to save $7 million for ratepayers here in the state.
So it is on behalf of ratepayers that we should be doing this.
Interesting. Yeah, there's definitely an economic impact here for, those of us who follow the law. We purchase the insurance that we're supposed to. We're paying for the people who habitually just do not want to buy it because they've made the choice that, getting a ticket for $125, if you get that for $10 in the case of just no proof of insurance, which is what most of the tickets written are for, it's much cheaper just to pay that ticket than to actually go out and buy insurance and follow the law.
Well, this bumps into my next question. The big problem with compliance is often the penalty for violating this law is less expensive than the insurance itself. So what is the penalty if you're caught without insurance? Is it a couple of $100 right now? Is it $10? That's it?
It's $125 max if you're caught without insurance. But most of the police officers are writing this ticket that's no proof of insurance. That's just a $10 ticket.
Okay.
So people aren't even bothering to go to court for that. They're going to mail in $10 and say, forget about it, they're done.
Sure.
But the municipal judges that I've spoken with have told me that the people that they actually see in court are habitual offenders who are there time and time again. And what's happening is they'll go to court. They'll have this ticket for no insurance, which is $125. Mm-hmm. They go to court. They ask the judge for more time so they can get insurance. The judge will give them some extra time. They'll come back with a policy and say, here, see, I purchased insurance. The day after the judge throws out their ticket, they cancel the insurance policy and they continue to drive without insurance.
Yeah. So what does AB 92 do to address that? Does it add more penalties as a way to incentivize buying insurance?
Right. First of all, AB 92 gets rid of the $10 ticket altogether because studies have shown that, the lower the fine, the less the compliance you're going to have with the law. So we get rid of the $10 ticket. We increase the penalties for driving without insurance. And after the second time you're caught, anybody can make a mistake the first time or you even forget to pay your premium, so technically an insurance policy gets canceled.
All right.
So what AB 92 does is it raises the dollar amounts of the fine, but more importantly, what it says is that anybody who's caught driving without insurance, the DMV will suspend their driver's license, and the people or the individual can get the driver's license back only when they get insurance and they enroll in what's called the SR22 program. The SR22 program is a insurance policy for high-risk drivers, but what the teeth in it is that the insurance company has to issue a certificate to the DMV. Therefore, if the person cancels the insurance policy the day after they go to court, the DMV gets notified from the insurance company that says, hey, this person who's supposed to have insurance canceled it. The DOT will then go and cancel the person's driver's license again, and they won't get reinstated until they keep insurance. So this is kind of a way to, it's like the old trust but verify. Okay, we're going to let you go buy a policy, but we're also going to monitor that you don't cancel that policy in the future.
Well, we've seen all sorts of people in Wisconsin cause accidents while driving on revoked or suspended licenses, too. It doesn't really keep them from climbing behind the wheel. They just ignore the law. But you're adding more penalties for not having insurance in that instance, or?
Right. So we're adding more penalties for not having insurance. You're driving. The first thing we're doing is we're saying, follow the law, have insurance if you're going to drive. The next problem that comes around is when people drive without a driver's license.
Right.
And a lot of the accidents we'll see in large urban areas involve both situations. A person has no insurance, no driver's license.
Right. AB 92 doesn't.
AB 92 does not deal with the no driver's license issue.
Right.
However, I've got another bill in drafting right now that we should be able to roll out within the next week or two that will say if you're caught driving without a valid driver's license, we're going to impound your vehicle and until you get insurance and until you get your driver's license.
Yeah, because
that
is a problem that we have to deal with, too, that has been largely ignored. It's amazing how often an accident will happen, and it will turn out that one of the actors was driving on a revoked license. I can already hear the argument, though. Sanfelippo is attacking poor people again. They can't afford insurance. What's your response?
Yeah, and, I've heard that from the opponents of the bill, that exact line. We're picking on poor people. They can't afford insurance. We shouldn't make them buy it. But what we're doing is making them follow the law. Driving is a privilege. It's not a right. And if you're not going to follow the law, you shouldn't be able to drive. But my response right away, the first time they throw that line at me is, well, then should we allow poor people who say they can't afford food to go rob a grocery store? I mean, they still have to follow the law. The law is the law. And right now, the law in Wisconsin says if you're going to drive, you have to have liability insurance so that if you cause harm or damage to somebody else's property, they're going to be able to be compensated for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this bill is aimed at just getting greater compliance with the law.
It's another thing we love to do in this society is pass laws and then give dispensation to poor people or people who say they can't afford it. So how do you answer the people who are going to say, hey, we caught you in a catch-22. You Republicans are against mandating health insurance, but here you are insisting on mandating car insurance?
Right, and the problem with that is when you have, mandated health insurance, the government is forcing you to go into their program, right? You have to buy insurance, follow their rules, but you're the only person, my health, I'm the only one that if I don't comply with that law that I suffer. Mm-hmm. If I'm driving without liability insurance, I have the potential every time I get behind the wheel to have an accident and cause either, physical damage to somebody's property or bodily harm, so I can actually injure another person. And if I don't have insurance to pay for their medical bills, now that other person is suffering. So we go from harming just myself with no health insurance to harming somebody else with no liability.
Well, and back to the fact that driving is a privilege, too, and you can, you don't have to drive. So where are you in the process of trying to get this thing onto the floor for a full vote?
So we've had a hearing a couple of months ago in committee, and we've gotten a couple of times we've had it scheduled to have a vote in the committee in order to get it to the floor, but for a variety of reasons we had to pull it back. We weren't able to get it done. So now we're nearing the end of the legislative session, so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get it out of committee, get it passed. I have been having get it passed in the Assembly, send it over to the Senate. I had a couple conversations with a few members in the Senate recently so that we can get the bill proposed and over into the Senate floor. And before we end in the spring, hopefully we'll have this passed.
Which committee is it sitting in?
It's in the Assembly. It's in the Judiciary Committee, which is Jim Ott's committee.
Okay.
And Representative Ott is a co-sponsor on the bill. He's very supportive of it. Jim has a legal background besides being a former weatherman. He's a lawyer, so he understands the importance of having laws on the books that are actually enforced. So Jim's been very supportive of it, and I fully expect that we will get that hearing soon so that we can get it to the Assembly floor and then move it on to the Senate.
So he's a lawyer and a meteorologist?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, a lot of people
Okay.
don't know that,
This
but
puts me to shame. Puts us
talk
all to
about an
shame.
overachiever, right?
Yeah, really. What was going on with him?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, the state Senate finally passed a modified version of government accountability reform on Friday. Have you been notified by Speaker Voss as to when the Assembly is going to meet and take up those changes?
Yeah, I think we're going to go to the floor. The talk is that we're going to go a week from today, and we're going to take up these two bills that the Senate has changed, and get them passed so that we can get finally move on to starting to reform that really disgraceful agency over there.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that at this point the Assembly conservatives aren't going to be digging their heels in too much on the Senate changes because this really does need to get done and get finalized.
Yeah, and I think that's the end. That's it in a nutshell. Obviously, we all would have our ideas of exactly the way things would work, but when it comes to government, we work together. We kind of add everything in and get to something that we can all live with. And I think we all realize that what comes out of this process is still going to be 100 times better than what we have right now with this agency that. It's just shameful the way that they participated in the John Doe and that they violated people's civil rights. And then they're not even doing their own job, as the Legislative Audit Bureau had showed that, they got all these statutory mandates that they're supposed to be doing, and they're not doing them because they're off doing these other things that they're not supposed to be doing.
Right. Well, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
That is State Representative Joe Sanfelippo of the West Dallas, New Berlin area. Yeah, on Friday, the Senate did pass these amended versions of GAB reform and then campaign finance reform, and they sent them back to the Assembly to sign off on the changes. The GAB bill ended up clearing 18-14, was the final vote. And this amended bill does go a long way toward decentralizing the Government Accountability Board, and it is what we've been describing all along. It's going to break the GAB. There will be no Kevin Kennedy type executive director who has all sorts of power and influence in one person in one position. It divides the current GAB into the two separate boards, the Election Commission and the Ethics Commission. The one change is that it does keep retired judges in the mix on the ethics board, on the ethics side. There are a couple of appointments for retired judges because you had some Republican senators. For some reason, you had Luther Olson and Sheila Harsdorf and Rob Coles and Jerry Petrowski. For some reason, they felt that retired judges were just some sort of holy grail of fairness or something, even though that had been proven to be not the case when it came to the Government Accountability Board. And those judges were overseeing this John Doe process and ostensibly allowing it to proceed. But for some reason, those four were just hung up on having retired judges. We have to have 2 retired judges on this ethics board. So that was really one of the bigger changes that they made, because these 4 threatened to, and apparently Howard Markline, too, of the far western Wisconsin, he apparently threw in with them, and they threatened to vote against the original version of the bill if they didn't get their way on the judges. So they got their way on the judges. But Scott Fitzgerald said afterward, today the Wisconsin Senate took another step in ending a dark period of our state's history. For the past several years, the GAB has been anything but accountable, repeatedly crossing lines and trampling over the constitutional rights of Wisconsin's citizens in an effort to carry out their own partisan agendas. And Matt Kittle says the theatrics on the left were, as you would imagine, hysterical, and as he waffled it, comedy drama. Mark Miller of Monona, he's a state senator, he apparently issued an obituary for the GAB when it was passed. He's just trying to make some political hay out of it. All right. They weren't the ones that were subject to the investigation, but you think if the tables were turned, they wouldn't be motivated to get this done? Absolutely.